Now, I don't want to engage the board's time in rehashing all of the issues that we've been through together. We all know what those are, and we've all spent a lot of time at it, and I don't want to be redundant, and I know you have a lot to consider today. But I will suggest to you this. The Inspector General's report, which has many things that I know some of you dispute, many things which I think are beyond dispute, makes clear what I think was obvious from the start, that in Massachusetts, one of the hallmarks of our process is that it's based on criteria. Charters are not meant to be granted and have not in the past been granted arbitrarily or without regard to the basic elements that are necessary for a successful school, and that's as it should be. It's very clear that in the case that is now before us in the form of the Gloucester Community Arts Charter School, that the criteria were not met. We've discussed in a lot of instances the idea of revocation, and it has been suggested by some that revocation is not legally permissible on the part of the board. I would suggest to you, Madam Chair, that that is incorrect. The plain reading of the statute and the plain reading of the regulation, as we have expressed today in a letter to the Secretary, indicates that the board does have that power. The statutory power was granted to this board to create regulations for the approval and disapproval of charter schools. This board promulgated regulations that reserve to itself the unlimited power to reconsider and to revoke. Now, some have suggested that because there's a list in the particular section, I believe it's 1.13, that there are certain instances that are illustrative in nature, that that's an exclusive list. I don't believe there is anyone who's had any experience with statutory construction who would suggest to you that that is meant to be an exclusive list. And in fact, in the letter that was sent to the Commissioner this morning electronically, and which will be transmitted to the rest of you later today, it is clear, and we cite other examples, where the term including but not limited to is used frequently to be not exclusive and to be inclusive. And you know, there was in the hearing that we had in Gloucester, which you all graciously attended so that we could try to get to the bottom of this, there was a suggestion made in a Latin term used, and I don't even recall it as a lawyer, but it was suggesting that you judge things by the company that they keep. And so that that list should be meant to be analogous to the things that would be for your consideration. Well, I would suggest to you that there's a more directly applicable Latin term for what's going on here, and it's res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. The list is not exclusive, and it's intended to give you the power to address this very situation. I don't believe there was ever a time where the legislature said, if the board makes a mistake, then it should have to perpetuate that mistake even against all the evidence before it. That's illogical, and it isn't reflected in the language of the regulation, and it isn't reflected in the language of the statute. So today I know that on the agenda, and I know it's coming up in a little while, it's not immediate, you are going to consider the issue of the Inspector General's report. And I know today also, because of the many folks that I've seen that have come, you are going to consider some alleged improprieties at another school. And I would suggest to you that in order to have the moral standing to be able to consider those alleged transgressions, you have to be introspective about the ones that have occurred in this situation as well. I don't think the board can pick and choose where it's going to seek to investigate or to right a wrong. I think it needs to right this wrong directly and forthrightly. And by the way, we have talked a lot about revocation and reconsideration. It seems to me that one important conclusion that was drawn by the Inspector General is that the charter in this case, because it was never properly granted and never met the criteria, was void ab initio. So even if someone would like to make the argument that you don't have the statutory or the regulatory power to reconsider, which you clearly do, then it seems to me that what really is called for here is an acknowledgement that this charter never properly existed because the criteria required for it to be granted were never met. Now, I know that there's a discussion, and I appreciate the Commissioner's response to some of the Inspector General's report, and there's a discussion of sub-criteria not being met, and that what's required of you is not to find that all of the sub-criteria were met. I don't disagree. But what we're talking about is substantial compliance with the criteria. It did not occur. And in order for the board to be able to move forward and to try to get us into the new era of education that we also desperately hope for and work so hard on in the most recent piece of legislation that was passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. We need you to do the right thing. And we need you to do the right thing so that we can stop this conversation, which will continue until justice is brought about, and move on to those other things. Now, if there is any doubt about your authority in this matter, I would suggest to you, first of all, I don't believe there is any, but if you believe that there is, that you refer the matter to the Attorney General, who would be called upon to defend you in a legal action about this decision anyway. Please take the proactive step if any doubt remains in your mind about your authority to take corrective action, and ask for an advisory opinion so that you can move forward. And please, at the end of the day, remember that we all share, you share, we share, the goal of a good educational system with transparency and accountability and the ability to have rational decisions made on behalf of the children of our Commonwealth. They deserve nothing less. I know you believe that. We do too. And I hope you'll take the action that's required. It was clear to me that the Secretary's letter in support of Representative Ferrante's amendment when the education bill was being considered in the House indicated that he too has reached the conclusion that this situation is untenable. And that was the reason for the support for that particular amendment. Well, I would suggest to you that when a wrong is to be righted, that it need be righted either legislatively, but more appropriately, executively, by the board that made the decision. And so I would hope that the Secretary will, as a member of this board, take the appropriate action by a motion or other appropriate means to initiate the reconsideration of this matter. I would be happy to discuss that with anyone who would like to, and I appreciate once again your time. I know you have a lot to do, but we've got to get this one right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tarr. Would Representative Ann Margaret Ferrante please come and address the board?